I'd like to begin creating some specific documentation for our project. Now, there's a wide variety of documentation types that are required in a typical architectural project. And in this movie, I'm going to look at creating an enlarged floor plan of the dining area. We're going to use that floor plan for a variety of things, but it starts with creating a call-out view. So Revit has lots of different view types, as we've seen. So this will be the first time we look at the call-out view. Now, I'm here in a file called Enlarged Floor Plan. And on the View tab, you can see lots of different types of views here on the Create panel. We've got our 3D view and our section view that we've looked at before. Right next to that is the Callout button here. If we click the drop down on the Callout button, we see that it has two options. It has Rectangular and Sketch. Now, if I did the rectangular callout, it's a little bit easier because you just click two opposite points on a rectangle. I could click from here to here. But what you would end up with is about half of the kitchen would be included in that call-out area, and that may be undesirable as the kitchen gets fleshed out later in the project. You might not want to see all that equipment and so forth in the dining room plan. The alternative is to use this sketch option right here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the sketch choice off that drop-down, and that takes me into what Revit calls sketch mode. Now, sketch mode is a mode where you create a two-dimensional sketch using the various tools here on the drop-down, and you can create any shape you like. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'll start out here next to the staircase, and I'll just click my first point, and I'm just going to start drawing some lines. And all I really want to do is make sure that these lines are a little bit larger than the dining room area. Down in the corner there where I have that curve, you can only draw straight lines in this sketch, but in this case, that curve is subtle enough that I don't have to worry too much about following it exactly. Now, you want to make sure that your sketch is completely closed when you're done. And in other words, you want to join up the first point with the last point, and then you'll click the Modify tool here or press Escape twice. You can see the shape of your callout, and when I come up here on the ribbon, I can click this big green Finish Edit mode. And when I do, you'll see a dashed outline appear in the shape of that callout that we just created. Now, it'll have this bubble associated with it over here. That bubble will eventually fill in with the drawing number and sheet number that this callout gets placed on. Later, when we place views on sheets, we'll see that fill in. For the time being, what I want to do is use this grip right here that's connected directly to the callout head and start to drag it. And notice that you can move this callout head anywhere that you like. It'll stay attached to the perimeter of that callout. I'm going to move it down here into the lower right-hand corner and put it at a slight angle like so. I'm going to click an empty space to deselect the callout. And if you look over at the project browser, you'll see that a new view has been created called Callout of Level 1. Now, you can accept that name if you like, but I'm going to rename it by right-clicking. And I'm going to call it Enlarged Dining Room Plan. Click OK. Now, to open that view, you can either select it here, right-click and choose Go to View, or you can just simply double-click it right here on the project browser. Either one is fine. When the view opens, you're going to see the boundary here, the inner boundary, matches the shape that you sketched for the callout. Notice that it has little blue grips on each edge, and you could use these to fine-tune the shape of the callout. So, for example, right here, you can see that I've kind of unnaturally cut off that doorway right there. So if I wanted to, I could use this grip to start stretching that just slightly to make the callout include the entire door. If there turns out to be some equipment or other things in here that you don't want to see, you could actually choose Edit Crop. That would take you back into the sketch mode, and you could literally draw the sketch up and around the doorway. And if you want to try that, I'll leave that up to you. But for now, I'm going to just go with it like this. So I will just make any little adjustments here just to fine tune it slightly. There's a few other things that you'll notice here that we might want to address. For example, these grid lines here extend all the way to the virtual rectangle here, and that's simply because the behavior of grid lines is for them to remain lined up with one another. So A and B, it makes sense for them to go a little bit past the callout boundary, but C, maybe not so much. So what you can do here is you can select grid line C, and then you want to be careful not to start to drag it, because if you drag it, it will drag all of them. I'm going to do Control Z and undo that. But I'm going to grab grid line C, and instead I'm going to unlock this in. So when I do that, now this little blue dot here, I can drag grid line C like so, and it will only affect grid line C. I could do the same thing with grid 4, unlock it, grab this little dot, stretch that down. And if you want, you can do the same thing with grid 5, unlock it, drag it down, and I'm going to let this one snap to grid line 4. So now what will happen is these two will move together. See? So if I fine tune them further, they'll move together, but grid 6 moves independently. So these are just some little fine tuning adjustments you can make if you like. You don't have to see this outer rectangle for the callout if you don't want to. So there's some toggle switches down here at the bottom of the screen on the view control bar. The first one is here. It looks like a little crop symbol. If you highlight it, it says do not crop the view. If you click that, it actually turns off the cropping behavior. And if I zoom out, you notice we're seeing the entire floor plan again. But notice the crop is still here. The crop region doesn't get deleted, it just gets disabled. So I'm going to re-enable it by clicking that icon again. The one next to it hides the crop region. So if I click that, it stays cropped, but it just turns off the display of that shape. That might make the view look a little bit cleaner here. Now, one more thing to point out to you here. When you create a callout view, Revit automatically adjusts the scale. So you may notice that all the annotation is a little bit smaller here. That's because the scale for this view has changed to 1/4 inch equals a foot. The original view was at 1/8 inch equals a foot, and Revit just simply doubles the scale. I'm going to make 1 or 2 more adjustments here. This section line that goes all the way through, you can actually modify that if you like. So I'm going to click on it. And you see this little small, it almost looks like a little Z shape right here. It says gaps and segments. If I click that, it will actually make a gap in the middle of this. And then you get a grip at each end. And I can eliminate that middle portion. I can do it again with this one. And eliminate that middle portion. None of this really affects the section itself. It's just affecting the graphic here in this view. Likewise here, maybe I don't want that quite so long, so I can shorten it a little bit. So these are all fine-tuned adjustments you can make to start cleaning up the view a little bit. And one last adjustment that I want to do is these lines right here. You may recall in a previous movie where we added rooms and did a colored room plan that we added these room separation lines to make a distinction between the various spaces in this open plan. Well, you don't have to actually keep the display of these room separation lines if you don't want to. If you recall, we had a command called Visibility Graphics. That was here on the View tab, Visibility Graphics, and the room separation lines are actually down here under a category called Lines. And if I expand that with this little plus sign right here, you can see the room separations right there. So I'm going to uncheck that, click OK, and you're going to see those boundary lines disappear, but notice the room is still there. The room is still there, and it's still shaped by those room separation lines. In fact, if I go back to level 1, you'll see that if I zoom in, those room separation lines are still displaying here in level 1. So all we did was hide them here in the enlarged floor plan view. So it makes this view display a little nicer. If those room separation lines display, they will print. So this is why I'm hiding them, because ultimately I'm not going to want them to print in this view. So a callout view is an enlarged view of any of your other views in your project. Here we did a plan example, but you can actually use the callout tool on sections and elevations as well. Callout shapes can be either a simple rectangle or they can be a custom shape. And you use your callout views to focus in on a certain area that you want to document in a little bit more detail in your project. In this movie, I'd like to take another look at dimensioning. In a previous movie, we looked at dimensioning, but there we used the dimension tool as a modification tool to help us move our geometry around to get our walls placed precisely or our doors and windows. And that's a perfectly valid use for the dimension tool. Another valid use and a very critical use of the dimension tool is to actually create dimensions on your drawings for the purposes of printing out those documents and reporting what those values are to the recipient. So that's what I'd like to focus on here in this movie, is how to create dimensions for the purposes of documentation. So I'm in a file here called dimensioning, and I'm in the enlarged dining room plan view, and I'm going to zoom in here near the top and begin adding my first few dimensions. So here on the quick access toolbar, I'm going to click the align dimension tool, and the align dimension tool is perhaps our most versatile, so we're going to stick with that. But as you can see, there are lots of other options here on the ribbon, so I encourage you to look at those at a later time. What I do want to focus on, though, is the options bar right here. There are a few choices that we want to consider. The first option is whether or not you want the dimension to favor the wall center lines or the wall faces. Now, I'm saying favor because Even though it might want to initially highlight the center line, you can always move your mouse slightly and press the tab key to force it to give you the face or the edge. So that you always have the option to tab in and get the point you want. The point of changing this setting is this becomes your new default. So if I choose wall faces, for example, it will now favor the faces of the wall, and I would have to tab to get the center. So that's probably a little bit nicer for your documentation type dimensions. Now, there are a couple other choices here that relate to the core of the wall. Our project uses generic walls, and so the core really doesn't come into play. But if you're using walls that have a core material, like maybe there's concrete block or studs and drywall, then you could use the core option to get it to dimension to the faces of stud, for example, instead of the drywall. But in this case, we're going to stick with wall faces, and I want to make sure that this setting is set to individual references. We'll look at the other option under there shortly. So I'm going to highlight this face of the wall, and then this face of the countertop and click it. Okay, click both of those, and that gives me the distance between those. Now I'll move to the next point, and then I'll pull all the way over to here to the inside face of this wall. Now, notice that I'm able to select multiple reference points in the same dimension string. You don't have to place individual dimension strings. And when you're done, the critical thing to do is you need to make sure that your mouse is not on top of any geometry when you make your last click. Your last click is an empty white space, and that determines where the dimension goes. So if you click on top of geometry, it'll just keep adding dimension points. So we want to make sure that we're in empty space. Let me do a couple more. I'm going to do this point down here and the other end of the counter here. And then I'll place it out here with a click. And then maybe I want to see the size of this opening here into the kitchen. So I'll do the face of this wall, one side of the opening, the other side of the opening, and maybe the other end of this wall. It's a little busy over here to place it here. So I'm just going to pull it over there and click. Let's start with those dimensions. Let me click the modify tool to cancel out of there. And let me zoom in just a little bit and see what we've got. So you can see the various numbers that have been placed. This one here is slightly on top of that wall there. So you can actually click the dimension and just move it slightly. Now, if it's moving too far, it's snapping too far, just use the arrow key on your keyboard. So I'm just going to nudge that down just one arrow just to keep it from covering up that wall right there. Now, look over here, and I noticed this 2'11" dimension. I'm not really happy with that, and I'm thinking, I think I would have rather have dimension to the opposite side of this wall. If you select the dimension, what you find is there's this Edit Witness Lines button right here. You don't have to erase the dimension and start over again. Just click Edit Witness Lines. All of the existing witness lines that you've already chosen will highlight in blue on the screen, so you can see them there in blue, this one, and so on. And what you notice here is that this one here is actually inside that countertop slightly, so it's not even really in the right place. So what I want to do is if you click an existing blue witness line, it will remove it. And if you click a new edge, it will add it. So with the Edit Witness Lines tool, you can add new witness lines, you can remove existing ones. And then here's the very important final click. Make sure that, again, you're in empty white space when you click, because if you're on geometry, it'll keep adding and removing witness lines. So I want to click out here in the middle of space somewhere, and that will complete the operation. So I'm going to cancel out of there to deselect everything. Let me zoom out a little bit, and let's consider this wall over here. For this wall, I want to dimension the wall and the openings, but that would be, a lot of clicks if I use the same technique that we used a moment ago. So I'm going to click the dimension tool, and that's where this entire walls feature could come into play. This is a very powerful feature. Now, if I click entire walls, a little options button lights up next to it. So I'm going to click that options button. And here you're going to see several options that are available for the entire walls feature. If you don't check any of these options here, then it's just going to do the entire length of the wall. But I want to do a little bit better than that. So I'm going to check this box right here for openings. Now, you can dimension all the openings in the wall, like all these windows, either to their centers or their widths. Now I'm going to choose widths. I prefer that. You can choose centers if you like. You can also include the intersecting walls. I'm not going to choose that in this case, but I do have a grid line here and here. So I'm going to choose the intersecting grids. So let's see what those settings do for me. Let's click OK. The way that you use this tool is instead of now picking individual witness line locations, you just highlight the wall that you want to dimension. So I'm going to click this wall. Notice that that will create a whole bunch of dimensions, and then I'm going to move out here to place the dimension. Now, one little word of caution here. Watch what happens if I move too far to the right. The dimension will disappear. So make sure that you click before it disappears, right? So I want to click inside of that mystery boundary there, and I'm going to click right there. The dimension will appear. I'm going to click the Modify tool to cancel out of the command. And why did the dimension disappear when we got past a certain point? Well, that's tied back to the crop region that's assigned to this view. So if you look down in your view control bar, we have this icon right here that shows or hides the crop region. So let's turn this one on to show the crop region. And you see there's the crop region right there that we drew in the previous movie. That crop region cuts the model. That's the crop for the model itself. Notice it doesn't affect the annotation. However, there's this dash line out here that does affect the annotation. So the way this works is if your dimension moves out too far, okay, you see it? It'll disappear. And that's because it's now outside of this dashed boundary. This little grip right here would allow me to get it back again if I pulled it too far. So your two remedies to dealing with the situation are to either just keep the dimension inside this dashed line or just widen that dashed line. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off this crop region, and I'm going to move these dimensions just a little bit closer to the model again, like so. Let me zoom in a little bit here, and as you can see, the text is a little bit cluttered here, and I have a couple remedies to that. I can select the dimension, and then these small little grips will appear on each piece of text. I can drag that piece of text out, and it will create a little leader pointing back to the dimension. That's one solution. Or the other solution is to select the dimension, and over here on the properties palette, I can edit its type. Now, when I click this button, it will open up the type settings dialog for these dimensions. I'm going to scroll down, and you can see here next to units format, this big button that shows me the format of the default units. I'm going to click that button. The default behavior is to use the project settings from this project. Now, you could cancel out of here and go change the project settings, but what I'm going to do instead is uncheck this to let this dimension override the project settings. And the only override that I want to enable is to turn on this checkbox right here and suppress 0 feet. I'll click OK twice, and you'll see that now these 6-inch values do not display 0 feet in front of them, and so they fit a little bit nicer within those witness lines. One last thing, let's say that you're working with a firm that's overseas, and you want to show both the imperial dimensions and the metric equivalents. If I go to Edit Type again, that's in the same general area of the dialog. Right here, you can see that alternate units is an option. Now, it's currently set to none, so I'm just going to open this little list of choices here, and I'll put it below the imperial value. It's going to default to millimeters by default. I'm fine with that. I click OK, and now you can see that I have the metric equivalent beneath each of my imperial values. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach the dimensioning of your floor plans. And of course, when you're getting your documents ready for printing and presentation, dimensions are a critical part of any architectural document set. In this movie, I'd like to look at tags. Tags are an important part of any document set, and we use them for a variety of purposes to call out the various doors, the windows, wall types, and so on. The file I'm in right now is called tags, and I'm in the level 1 floor plan. And currently there are room tags for each of the rooms in this file. And those came in as we created the rooms automatically. But for the other objects, like the doors and the windows and so on, there aren't any tags yet, and adding them is a pretty simple affair. Now we can look at the tag button on the quick access toolbar. So it's right up here. And it's actually called tag by category. And the reason it's called that is if you move your mouse around the screen, Revit will actually change the shape of the tag that you're using, the kind of tag you're using, depending on the category of object under your cursor. So here I'm getting a diamond-shaped tag. Here I'm getting more of an oval-shaped tag. Over here I would get a hexagon tag. So you can see that each of the objects that are under my cursor, it knows what kind of tag to give me. And the way it knows that is this button right here. If we click that, you can see these are all the tags that are currently loaded in your project. So if you try and click on a object that does not have a tag, like a ceiling or a curtain panel in this case, then Revit will just simply prompt you to load an appropriate tag. And I'm going to cancel out of here. And the last setting I want to look at here on this options bar is the leader option. If you were tagging your walls, you'd probably want the leader. I'm going to go ahead and click right there. Now, I'll talk about why that value is empty in just a moment. If you were tagging your doors, you probably would not want the leader. So I would uncheck that. And then when I click the door, the tag would be associated directly with the door or maybe with the window and so on. So you can see that you might want that leader option to be on or off depending on the kind of tag that you're talking about. Now let me cancel out of the command for a moment. This door already knew that it was door number 3, but notice that this wall did not fill in any designation. That's simply because the designation hasn't been filled in yet for this wall. So what I'm actually going to do is go back to tag by category, turn on the leader, let me tag a couple more walls. Now, these walls are all the same type. This wall is a different type right here. And let me show you how to input that value. So I'm going to select this wall right here and choose the edit type command here on the properties palette. Now, the value that that tag is looking for is this value right here, the type mark. And as you can see, it's currently empty, which explains why the tags are all empty. Now, just to kind of clarify a little bit here, tags can look at any property of the object. And you can see that we have a long list of properties to choose from. You could make a tag that showed you the cost of the wall or the fire rating of the wall or the description of the wall. In this case, this tag is looking at the type mark. And all I have to do is type in a designation here. I'll put in A1, click OK. Not only will it fill in here, but you'll see it fill in there and there as well. This one did not fill in because this is just a different type wall. These were generic 8-inch walls. This is a generic 5-inch wall. So to get that one to fill in, I would just have to repeat the process and give it a type designation as well. And when I click OK, it would fill in. Furthermore, if I came back and added a new tag to another wall of that type, you'll see that it will have the same designation. So once you've filled in the type designation, the rest will take care of itself. Now, these tags are actually looking at the instance value of the door. So this is door number 3. This is door number 4. So the tag knows whether or not it should look at the individual value of the door or the global value of the door. Let's put another tag here, turn off the leader, tag this door, you can see that it automatically goes to door number 4. Now, I'm stopping the command because I want to show you one other command for tagging here. You don't have to tag each of your objects individually one at a time. That can get a little tedious. We've got several doors here in this plan, and if you look at your Annotate tab, here's that tag by category button we were just using. Again, you can find it here as well, but right next to it is tag all. Now, the way this command works, it's actually tag all, not tagged. So it's going to tag all of the elements of whatever category you select that haven't already been tagged. So in this case, these 2 doors have been tagged. I won't get duplicate tags, but all the doors here and here that haven't been tagged yet, all I have to do is click OK, and it will add a tag to all those missing doors. Tag all not tagged is probably the fastest way to add a bunch of tags to a floor plan. Now, I'm going to show you one last example. I'm going to go back up to my enlarged dining room plan, and maybe I want to start tagging the chairs and tables in this plan. To do that, I could use the same exact command, tag by category, and highlight one of these objects. The trouble is, when I do, it's going to say, you don't have a furniture tag loaded. So this is what I was talking about a moment ago when we clicked on the tags button and saw which tags were currently loaded in the project. So all you have to do is say yes here, and it will take you to the load command and allow you to find an appropriate tag. So there's an annotations folder right here, and then an architectural folder, and then finally there's a furniture tag right there. So I'm going to open that up, and now when I click on the table, it will show me an appropriate tag, and as you can see, it works the same way. You can also see, however, if I cancel out of there and zoom in a little, that those tags are currently empty. Well, it's the same issue that we saw with the wall tag. If you select any one of these tables, and it doesn't matter which one I pick because they're all the same, go to Edit Type and come down here, you can fill in a type mark designation. So I'm just going to call these T1, click OK, and you see that they're now all T1. That brings up an interesting issue here. You may decide that you don't want to tag in the same way that the tag was built for. In other words, the doors were tagging individual door numbers, right? So this is door number 1, this is door number 2. The walls were saying this is a type A wall, this is a type B wall. The tables are doing the same thing. This is a type T1 table. Now, if you want to actually number the individual tables, if I select this table, scroll down, it has a marked value as well. it's currently empty, but I could fill that in. I could say this is table 1, and this is table 2, and this is table 3. The trouble is, the tag that I have is not looking at that value. So if you want that tag to look at that value, what you'd actually have to do is edit that family and modify it. Now I'm going to select this tag. I'm going to click Edit Family. That takes me into the tag itself. I'm going to select this piece of text right here, which is actually called a label. And then over here on the Properties palette, I'm going to edit it. And it's looking for the type mark, as we saw back in the project. I'm going to remove that. And in its place, I'm going to take the mark here and add that over. And that's all we have to do to basically change this tag from a type tag to an instance tag. Best practice is you want to go to the big R here and do a save as and give this a new name. Now, you can put it in your library folder, which is where it went to by default, but I'm going to put it in my exercise files. And I'll just call this furniture instance tag to distinguish it. Click here to load it back into my project. That takes me back to this level 1 floor plan. Let me go back to the enlarged dining room. I'm going to select with my control key each of the existing tags that I already have. Come up here to the drop down, and you'll now see that I have a furniture instance tag, and I can swap it out, and now it tells me that I have table 1, 2, and 3. So if you don't like the tag the way it was originally configured, it's real easy to change it. But really, the best thing to do is to save a copy so that you actually have both, and you can switch between the two easily. Tags are a necessary part of any documentation set, and as you can see, the process of adding tags here in Revit is fairly straightforward. You can add them one at a time with the tag by category, or you can use tag all and make short work of the task by doing an entire plan in one step. In this movie, we're going to look at schedules. Now, schedules in Revit can be used for a variety of purposes. We certainly can create the traditional door schedule or room finish schedule or any of those sort of tables and reports that you might typically see on a document set. Now, the big difference is in traditional hand drafting, you would be creating that schedule manually and painstakingly by laying out a bunch of lines and text and manually coordinating all the data that was contained in there. In Revit, a schedule is a live view of the model. So you just simply ask Revit to go look through your model for a certain category of information, and it will list out all those items for you in a table automatically. Furthermore, the information is a direct live link back to the model. So if you make any change in the schedule, the model updates and vice versa. If you change the model, the schedule updates. It's a live view. Now, we've seen a few examples of this in some of the earlier movies. And if we look here on the project browser and I scroll down just a little bit, there's a schedules and quantities branch here, and we've got a door schedule, a room schedule, and a window schedule already. Now, if you open some of these, you can see that it's got every door listed, complete with the sizes, and I've even gone in and started filling in some information like the material and the type and so on. Now, here's a room schedule, same kind of thing. All the rooms that we created in a previous movie are listed, and I started filling in the finish information. Now, I'm going to close both of these with the X right here. Both of those schedules would be perfectly suitable to put on a sheet and print along with your document set, and usually most projects are going to require schedules like that. But we can use schedules for a variety of other purposes as well. Because the schedule is a live view of the model, we can use it as a querying tool to ask questions of our model and get important information and feedback. So for example, if I wanted to discuss with my building owner just how much seating I have in this dining room, I could use a schedule as a tool to help me determine that. Now, I'm looking at the enlarged dining room plan here, and I have all of the tables, and some of them are tagged already. And what I want to do is create a list of all of those tables and chairs. So I'm going to go to the View tab, click on the Schedule dropdown, and choose Schedules and Quantities. I have my list filtered by architectural categories. Just make sure that architecture is checked. It doesn't really matter what the other checkboxes say. And scroll down here and make sure that you choose furniture. That's the category we're interested in. I'm going to accept all the other defaults, the name, furniture, schedule, and so on. Click OK, and that takes me to the Schedule Properties dialog. Here I can choose from this list of available fields which fields I want to include in the schedule. I'd like to know what level the furniture's on, what its family and type name is, so I'll add that, how many items I have, and any comments they might have. So I'll just keep this a really simple schedule. So I just add those 4 fields. Let's click OK and see what that gives us. I now have this really long list. If you scroll through here, you can see there are quite a few items in this file. I'm going to go over here and make this a little bit more legible. So between B and C here, I'm going to click and drag, make that column a little bit wider so that I can read the full name. Now, you'll notice that I start with a table, then I get some chairs, then another table, then some more chairs. So it might make more sense if I started sorting and grouping the schedule a little bit. Look over here at the properties palette, scroll down, and you're going to see a series of edit buttons available here. Next to sorting and grouping, I'm going to click edit. That will open up a dialog that allows me to sort by up to 4 criteria. Now, the criteria that are available here are the fields that you added back on the Fields tab. So you can only sort by fields you've actually added to your schedule. And in this case, I'm going to choose family and type. Let's click OK and see what that gives me. So that had the result of grouping all the family names together, which is a little bit nicer. But you can see that I've got items interspersed between level 1 and level 2. So now that I think of it, it might make a little more sense to go back to sorting and grouping and change this first criteria to level, and then maybe do a second criteria for the family and type. Now, while I'm here, each criteria can have a header, and you can insert a blank line to give it a little bit more breathing room. So I'm going to do a header here and a blank line here, and let's click OK. And you'll now see the word level appear here, and then over here is that blank line and the word level. Now, I see the word level. I don't necessarily need to see it again. So actually, if I go to the Formatting tab, I can take that level field and I can make it hidden. When I do that and I click OK, it will remove the redundant level field and it will just leave the header. So the header stays, but I don't see that information over and over again. I still, if I look at the count column, I still see a count of 1 next to every item. But it probably makes a little bit more sense to group and sort these even a little further. So let's go back to grouping and sorting. And what I want to do is turn off itemize every instance. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to turn on the grand totals here. And let's click OK. And now the entire list collapses down and I get a full count of each item, but I only get each item listed once. So this is a much easier list to look at and digest. A few more finishing touches. Let's go back to sorting and grouping. I can add a subtotal on any of my sort criteria. So per level, I can ask how many pieces I have. Let's do totals only for that. Under formatting, these are numerical, so it might be nice to take the count field and right align it. And then if you check this box, calculate totals, that's what will give you a subtotal here and here. So let's click OK on all of those changes and see what we got. So I have 100 items on the first floor. I have 99 on the second floor and a grand total of 199. This is certainly a very useful schedule now that would allow my building owner to know just how many pieces of furniture they might want to order. Maybe my building owner would like to know how many people they can seat in the restaurant. So to do that, we could duplicate the schedule and vary the way that it's set up. That will be the subject of the next movie. In this movie, we'll continue our look at schedules by going a little deeper and customizing the furniture schedule that we created in the previous movie. So in the previous movie, we created this furniture schedule, which essentially just gives us a count of items that we have in our project. And so this could be useful to help our building owner know how many pieces they have to order. So perhaps the building owner has come back to us and said, well, what I'd really like to know is how many people I can seat in my restaurant. The wrinkle there is that we can't just simply say, well, just count the number of seating objects you have. That would work for the Breuer chair because you can only seat one person per chair. But what about the booth seating? The booth seating is a little bit more of a challenge because you can sit more than one person on each of those booths. So furthermore, we can't just use the totals in this schedule because this schedule also includes the tables. So there's a few things we need to do. We need to get the tables off of this schedule and have the schedule be just the chairs. And then we need to find some way in order to indicate how many people each of those booths can see. So let's look at doing that here with this example. I'm in a file called Customizing Schedules. And of course, we get this furniture schedule open at the moment, and you can find that down here on the project browser. Now, the first step will be to simply duplicate the schedule that we have. So I'm going to right-click on the furniture schedule, and under Duplicate View, choose Duplicate. That will create a copy, which I will right-click and rename, and I'm going to call this Seating Schedule. With that seating schedule active, let's begin modifying it. So the first thing we want to do is filter out any of the tables. If you look here on the properties palette, you'll notice among the 5 items that we can edit, filter is one of the choices. So I'm going to choose the edit button right next to filter, and you can filter by up to 4 criteria. Now the criteria that are available here are the same fields that you added that we were able to sort and group on. So if you recall that over here we had our fields that are part of the schedule, those are the same items that appear here. Now, there are a few limitations. Notice that family and type is not on the list. nor is the count. Well, you can't filter by the count, and you can't filter by the family and type name. Revit shows you the names that are available to filter on. We can filter by some of the other fields, but in order to do that, we have to add them. So our job is to find a field that's a good candidate to filter on that would give us just the chairs or just the seating. If we look at our available fields here, there's a lot of choices, but what I'm going to do is choose the type mark. The reason I'm going to choose the type mark is because we get to input our type marks. And what I've started to do is label the type marks for each of our items, starting with the letter S. So let's go ahead and add the type mark. I'm going to move it up to the top of the list, and then let's go over here to filter. Notice that type mark is now on the list. Now, when you choose your filter criteria over here, you can then be more specific. What about the type mark? Do you want it to equal something, not equal something, contain something? What I'm going to do is say it has to begin with the letter S. Now, this is case sensitive, so I'm putting uppercase S. Now, let's click OK and see what that does. What I've begun doing is inputting the letter S in front of the type designation for all of my seating families. So I've done that with many of the booth seating, but I still have a few to do. So at the moment, the schedule is filtering too much. So now what I need to do is go back out to my model and add type designations beginning with the letter S to the other items that I want to appear here on the schedule. So let's go back to my enlarged dining room plan. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And I could hunt around and select each object and go to edit type and look for a designation. And if it's there, fine, leave it alone. And if it's not there, I could type it in, but that's kind of a tedious way to do it. Notice that this one had a designation already. This one doesn't actually have a designation already. So I could do it that way, but it's kind of a slow way. Let's add tags instead. Because if the tag comes in empty, then I know I need a designation. And if it comes in with a value, then I know it's done already. So you recall from a previous movie that we learned how to add tags and we learned how to do it quickly. The command was here on the annotate tab, and it's the tag all command. So when I choose this command, we get to tag all not tag. I'm going to tag all the objects in this current view. And notice I have several choices for furniture tags. Now, the furniture tags instance is the ones that we're using on the tables here. Those were the ones we created in the previous movie. What I want to do is make sure I'm using the type tag because we're sorting our schedule by the type mark. So that's this tag right here. I'm going to use the boxed version and I'm going to click OK. Notice that a blank tag appears on all the items that still need a designation. Now it looks like a daunting task, but it turns out that if I zoom in here, it's really only 2 items. I'm going to click right on this tag. Notice the question mark. I'll click in there. SB4, seating booth 4. Press enter, and then Revit will ask me if it's okay to apply this to all instances of this type, and I'm going to say yes, that's exactly what I want. Notice that all of these fill in as SB4. I'm going to do the same thing right here. This is going to be SC1, seating chair 1, enter, and again I'll click yes, and that fills in every chair. So 2 edits and I'm done. If I go back to my schedule, seating schedule, open it up. Notice that I now have more items on the list. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, that's it, we're done. Here's 82 on this floor, 80 on this floor, and we can seat 162 people, but not quite. This is just counting the number of physical seating objects. It's not counting how many people each of these can accommodate. So we need to add another field here that allows us to designate how many people each seating item can accommodate. Now, with the broiler chair, naturally, it's going to be 1 per, but with the booths, it's going to vary. So let's take a look at how we can do that. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to click the edit button next to fields. And right here, we can add our own custom parameter. Right here in the middle, I'm going to click add parameter and type in a name for this custom parameter, number of persons. For the type of parameter, I want to change that to an integer. An integer is just a whole number, and so I'll be able to put in 1 or 2 or 3. And really important, I want to make sure this parameter is a type-based parameter. We don't want an instance because then you literally have to input this value for each and every chair. That would sort of defeat the purpose. What I want to do is do it at the type level, click OK, OK again. That puts the number of persons fields in here at the end. And now all I have to do is go through these 5 fields here and input the values, and it will be applied to all instances of those chairs. For the 36-inch long booth, I can seat one person. When I enter, Revit will tell me that it has to apply to all instances of that type. So I'll click OK. The 60-inch booth can accommodate 3. OK. The broiler chair can accommodate 1. OK. Notice that fills in on both floors because it's the same broiler chair. And then finally, the 48-inch booth can accommodate 2. So just like that, I've put in all the values that I need to put in. But I now need to total up those numbers. So this is how many each chair can accommodate. Now we just need to create the total. Let's click over here on the formatting button. We're going to select the number of persons. I'm going to right align it. And I'm going to tell it to calculate the totals. When I do that, and I click OK, I'll get the grand total number of persons I can seat on each floor and the grand total for the entire building. Notice that these totals now are multiplying. Previously, this said 3. It's 3 times 7. So we have 7 of these benches. Each one accommodates 3 people. We've got a total of 21 persons. So it's working the way we expect. So now we've got a report that we can go and have a discussion with our building owner, and with confidence we can tell him, your restaurant can accommodate 184 people. So you can see that schedules in Revit are not just about what you put on your document sheets. Schedules are an incredibly powerful tool that allow you to query your model and get really useful information out. If you've heard the term building information modeling, this is the I in BIM. This is the information part, and it's a very powerful part of Revit. In this movie, I'd like to look at the detailing process in Revit. Not everything that you create in your Revit project will be part of the model. There are many advantages to building model elements because they appear in multiple views, and when you change them, they change everywhere. But not everything needs to show in all views. And so there are certainly plenty of instances where we have items that are considered construction details that really only show in one place. And the quantity of information that's displayed in those views is at a level of detail that makes it impractical to consider modeling all those elements. Consider things like bolts and screws and flashing and mortar joints and clips and hangers. None of these items really would give you much benefit to adding them three-dimensionally in your model. They would just simply serve to weigh down the model and impede performance without really adding a whole lot of benefit. So at some point, you need to stop modeling and begin drafting. And essentially what we do in a Revit process is we do a hybrid. So it usually starts by building a view, an enlarged view of a certain area that will give us a portion of our model to look at. And then on top of that view of the model, we'll add additional drafted components to complete the detail. I'd like to show you a quick example of that here in this prep station. I'm in the detailing file and I'm in the level 1 floor plan. And the first step is to create that view, that enlarged view that we're going to then add the detailing to. So I'm going to come up here to the quick access toolbar. I'm going to click the section tool. And then over here on the properties palette, it defaults to a building section. I just want to open that up and change that to detail. Then I'm going to click 2 points. I'll click over here to the right and drag through the countertop to the left. That'll create a very small little detail view. I'm going to deselect it, and here's a shortcut to open that view. You can just take this little bubble that appears here and double click it, and that will open up the view. Now, the crop region needs a little bit of fine tuning here. So let me adjust that a little bit so I can see the full height of my detail, and I'll actually narrow it up just a touch, and I don't need to see quite that much down below, so I'll shorten it there as well. Now the next thing I want to look at is the scale. This section cut got created at 1/8 inch equals a foot, and that's way too small for a detail. So I'm going to open up the list of scales here, and I'm going to enlarge this scale to 1.5 inch equals a foot. And that will adjust the view that you see on screen here. And you can see, of course, the level annotation got a lot smaller. This gives me the basic starting point. I have my low height wall here and my countertop here. And now what I want to do is start adding detail components on top of that. Now, the way that I do that is I come over here to the Annotate tab, and there's a component tool here on the detailing panel. It's just called Detail Component. If yours doesn't show here, there's a little drop down, and it might show Repeating Detail or Legend Component. Just make sure you're choosing Detail Component from this list. This behaves much like the 3D component did, Over here on the list, we have a series of choices. So you can see that there are several detail components already loaded into this file. And I'm going to start with a couple that are already here. There's a light gauge metal channel and a light gauge metal stud. So I'm going to choose this 3 5/8 inch light gauge metal channel and bring that in. I'm going to zoom in down here at the bottom. Notice that it's going vertically. I'll just tap my space bar to rotate it 90 degrees. And then I want to line it up with the center of the wall and then just sort of place it down here towards the bottom. I'm going to zoom back out, drag to the top, zoom in, tap the space bar twice, and place another one up here at the top. Then I'm going to come over here, change to the light gauge metal stud 3 5/8. That shape changes slightly. Let's zoom out again, pan over here. Gonna come in here, tap the space bar, and get it lined up with the center and about near the top of the countertop. Tap the space bar one more time and do another one right here. Now you see how I'm having a hard time getting it lined up? I'm gonna get it close by, like so. I'm gonna click the modify tool and cancel out of the command. Let me zoom in here just a little bit. We have this wonderful tool on the modify tab called the align command. So I'm gonna go to modify, click on the align tool right here, right above the move command. And what you do is you pick twice. The first point is your point of reference. So I want this stud to line up with this stud. So my point of reference is going to be the side of the one I want to line up with. That's this guy. Then you pick the edge of the one that you want to align. And you see now those two are perfectly aligned. Let's do it again. I want to line up here and then this guy. And they both move into perfect alignment. So the align tool is a great way to move and or rotate objects into perfect alignment with some other object that you already have. So those are the studs. Now I want to add the drywall. Now, if I go back to the Annotate tab and click the Component button, we don't have a drywall component currently loaded in this project. Now, these component families that we're adding are actually just 2D detail component families. They behave a lot like the other components we were adding, except that these are view-specific. They only occur in this view. If you open up any other view of the project, you won't see these objects, and they're two-dimensional. But there's a whole bunch of them that are included with the software. So I can access those ones that are included right here on the Load family, just like we did with the 3D components. Here in the U.S. Imperial Library, there's a Detail Items folder. I'll open that up. And then there's several subfolders organized in master spec divisions, and I'll just find the folder that I need, Division 9, and then plaster and gypsum wallboard, and then find the gypsum board here at the bottom. There's gypsum wallboard in section. I'm going to open that. And if you look over here on the list, not only did it load in the gypsum wallboard in section family, but all of these different sizes. So I'm going to use the 5/8 type and zoom in here towards the bottom, click my first point, and start to drag. This is a 2-click family. It's what we call a line-based family. So you pick once, and then you go to the other end here, and you pick again, and it creates the component. Let's repeat. Let's click our first point there, down here, and our next point there. So what that does is it draws the drywall complete with the stippling. It gives you all of the detailed information about the drywall. It just does it with a 2-dimensional component. So you're not actually modeling the drywall. You're just, representing it here 2-dimensionally. Let's do a few more components. Component tool, load family, detail items. I'm going to go into woods and plastics, then millwork. And I'm going to take this millwork, standard millwork in section. This is just a standard wood board, and I'm going to open that. Now, this one has a bunch of sizes available if you scroll through the list. And so what you can do is just sort of scroll through here and find the size you want. I've got a 5-inch partition here. I'm going to choose a 1x6, which will be just a little bit wider than that. Click OK. And this is going to give me a nice wood cap that I can use up here at the top. I'm going to tap the space bar to rotate it. And I'm going to place it right there. And now I have this nice little wood cap at the top of my wall. Okay. Again, return to the component tool. Let's load family. And I'm going to bring in one more. I'm going to go to detail items. And then I'm going to go to furnishings. And then under casework. In casework, we have a countertops folder. And there's a countertop in section family right there. I'm going to open that up. and it's pointing opposite of the way that I want. So what I'm going to do is just get it lined up with the top of the countertop here and click. Cancel out of the command, zoom in a little bit. Now I'm going to mirror it on itself. So I'm going to select this object, come up here and click the mirror tool on the modify tab, and make sure you uncheck the copy checkbox right there. When I do that, it will mirror it and delete the original. So it'll mirror the actual object instead of making a copy of the object. Now I'm going to move it from this point over to this point, and then you can either stretch this grip to lengthen it, or actually your align command will work again here. If we go to align and I pick the leading edge right there, and then the edge of this, it will actually stretch it out to match the length that we have there. So you can see where I can use the underlying model to help me build these detail components on top. Now, none of this geometry that I've added on top actually appears in the model. It's all just 2D geometry that we've layered on top. And you could certainly add other things. You could add caulking in there, you could add wood base at the bottom, and you could add blocking over here. All of those components can be found in that detail items library. But I'm going to go forward here and just add a few notes to kind of finish up this detail. So if we go into the Annotate tab, we've got our text tool right here. Now the text tool can be created with or without a leader. So the default doesn't have a leader. And if I just sort of click right here and type in a note, what you want to do is type your note and then click next to it to complete the note. You can see that that will just create the piece of text. Or you can click one of these options here with the leaders, and I'll do this 2-segment leader, and click where you want to point to, click where you want the elbow to be, and then where you want the note to go, and then type your note. Don't forget to click next to it to complete the creation of the note. And you could continue to type additional notes. And then that first note that we created, is actually possible to select it. And then up here on the ribbon, we can add a leader after the fact. So I'm going to click this little plus sign here for a leader on the left. And then I can take these little grips and I can point to the location where I want that leader to go. And you can fine tune the position of this text, and you can even add a little elbow here, like so, to make it a little more consistent with the rest of the notes. So if necessary, you can add other notes and dimensions and other detail components to finish up your detail. But the basic process of creating a detail in Revit usually involves making a section cut somewhere in the model to get you started, and then overlaying on top of that a series of 2-dimensional detail components and text notes.